Ilara Vale had spent most of her life learning how quietly a person could disappear inside her own family. Tonight, apparently, she was expected to disappear completely. Put it on. Seraphine stood across the dressing room, pale with anger and fear, holding out the silver ceremonial veil meant for her own wedding. Ilara stared at it. Beyond the closed doors, servants hurried through the manor preparing for the carriage that would take House Vale's eldest daughter north to marry Alpha King Cale Draven. The alliance was supposed to save their failing estates, secure their borders, and restore a family name their father had nearly bankrupted. Seraphine had agreed to every term. Until tonight. "I'm not marrying him," her sister said. "You signed the agreement." "Father signed it. With your consent." Seraphine's mouth tightened. "You've heard what they say about Cale Draven, that even his own court fears him, that he crushed 3 rebellions before 30. I won't spend my life trapped beside a monster. So you want me trapped instead?" The silence answered before Seraphine did. Ilara almost laughed. Of course, when they were children, Seraphine received the finest tutors while Ilara learned to make herself useful. When money became scarce, Ilara's dresses were sold first. When their father needed someone to blame, he always seemed to find the daughter whose future mattered less. Seraphine stepped closer. "If the marriage fails tonight, father will say you sabotaged it. He already told me." Ilara went cold. "He'll ruin you publicly," Seraphine continued, "and House Vale will lose everything." It was cruel because it was believable. Ilara looked at the veil again. She told herself this was temporary. She would survive the ceremony, reach the northern citadel, then find some way to escape before the lie became permanent. Hours later, beneath cathedral torches and the weight of Seraphine's silver gown, Ilara stood before Alpha King Cale Draven. He was taller than she expected, broad-shouldered, dressed in black formal military clothing, his expression unreadable as the vows were spoken. Ilara kept her face hidden. When asked, she gave Seraphine's name. The final vow bound them before the watching court. Only later, after the doors closed behind them in a quiet palace corridor, did Cale finally speak directly to his new wife. His voice was low, controlled. "You should understand something before tonight goes any further." Ilara's heart slammed against her ribs. Cale did not reach for her veil. "I will honor this marriage politically," he said, "but I will never force intimacy from a woman who did not choose me." For the first time that night, Ilara forgot to be afraid of being discovered. She was too busy wondering why the monster everyone feared had just offered her the one thing her own family never had. A choice. Ilara barely slept. Cale's words followed her into the unfamiliar silence of the northern citadel, disturbing her far more than a threat would have. She had prepared herself for cruelty, possession, perhaps even imprisonment. She had not prepared for separate chambers, a locked door she controlled, or a husband who had walked away without touching her veil. By morning, however, relief gave way to urgency. She needed to leave. The answer came when a royal official delivered the schedule for the coming weeks. The marriage alliance would not be fully ratified until the Moon Council gathering. Until then, both houses were expected to present a stable union. If the new queen vanished now, questions would begin immediately, and those questions would lead directly to Seraphine. Ilara was trapped by the very lie she had agreed to survive. So she began studying the citadel instead. She learned which corridors connected to the outer courtyards, when the gates changed guards, and which servants traveled regularly between the palace and nearby settlements. Yet the more carefully she observed her surroundings, the more she noticed things she had never expected. Cale did not command by shouting. Servants did not flinch when he approached. And when he summoned Ilara to discuss her formal responsibilities, he remained behind his desk rather than invading the distance between them. "You will have your own household staff," he said. "Your chambers remain yours. No one enters without permission." Ilara hesitated. "Including you." His dark gaze lifted. "Especially me." Every story she had heard about him seemed to fracture a little more. The contradiction apparently worked both ways. Cale began watching her with increasing curiosity. Ilara remembered servants' names after hearing them once. She asked practical questions about food stores instead of jewels or celebrations. When an advisor mentioned a childhood summer Seraphine had supposedly spent at the Western Lakes, Ilara answered too quickly that she had never been there. She caught herself. I mean, not since I was very young. Cale's eyes rested on her for one unsettling second longer than necessary. Then he continued the conversation. Later, while waiting outside a council chamber, Ilara noticed 2 winter supply ledgers left open on a clerk's table. Years of managing the neglected side of Housevale had taught her what numbers looked like when someone hoped nobody would compare them. One settlement had been charged for considerably more grain than it had received. She could have ignored it. Instead, she marked the discrepancy and quietly handed the page to Cale before leaving. By evening, an investigation had confirmed missing supplies, and replacement provisions were ordered north before the roads worsened. Ilara expected nothing more. Instead, Cale found her the following morning. You notice what 3 officials missed. I noticed 2 numbers that didn't agree. And because you did, families will have enough food. She looked away, uncomfortable with the weight he gave such a simple act. I didn't do it for praise. I know. That answer made her look back. There was no suspicion in his expression now, only assessment and something dangerously close to respect. Then Cale held out a folded itinerary. I'm inspecting the northern settlements tomorrow. Ilara glanced from the document to him. And I want my wife beside me. Her carefully constructed plan had been to learn enough about his kingdom to find a way out. Instead, the Alpha King had just opened the gates himself and asked her to ride through them at his side. The folded itinerary remained in Ilara's hand long after Cale walked away. By the next morning she had decided the inspection was not a complication. It was an opportunity. If she could not disappear before the Moon Council, perhaps she could make Cale regret marrying her enough to end the arrangement himself. Seraphine had been raised to become everything a noble bride was supposed to be: graceful, agreeable, polished, and careful never to embarrass the family. Ilara could be precisely the opposite. The northern settlement was already busy when the royal party arrived. Ilara stepped down from the carriage beside Cale and immediately abandoned the formal path prepared for them. Instead of remaining beside the officials, she walked toward the families gathered near the supply wagons. She asked what they had received. Then she asked what they had been promised. The answers did not match. Ilara. Cale's voice came from behind her. She turned, expecting irritation. Instead, he was watching the local administrator. Ilara deliberately pushed further. The records say these households received full winter allocations. They say they didn't. The administrator stiffened. Your Majesty, villagers often misunderstand distribution schedules. Then explain it to me, Ilara said. Silence spread around them. She knew exactly how inappropriate she was being. A properly trained royal bride would have raised the concern privately. Seraphine certainly would have. Good. The administrator produced an explanation involving delayed wagons, damaged stores, and accounting errors. Ilara listened until he contradicted a figure she remembered from the Citadel ledger. That isn't what your report says. His face changed. Cale noticed. Within minutes, royal officers were examining the records. By afternoon, the discrepancy had become impossible to dismiss. Supplies had been deliberately diverted before reaching the settlement. Ilara waited for Cale's anger. It came, but not toward her. He ordered the remaining stores secured, and the administrator removed pending investigation. Only when they were alone near the carriage did Cale turn to her. You ignored protocol. I did. You challenged one of my administrators in front of his own people. Yes. His expression remained severe. Ilara almost felt hopeful. I would make a terrible queen, she said. Something shifted in his eyes. Would you? I have very little interest in behaving like one. Cale looked toward the villagers receiving the recovered supplies. Perhaps I've had enough people who know how to look royal. Ilara stared at him. That was not how this was supposed to go. On the journey back, Cale asked for her observations about the settlement. Not politely, not ceremonially. He actually listened. When she mentioned weaknesses in the distribution system, he questioned her until she was defending her reasoning instead of remembering she wanted him to dislike her. At the Citadel, she wrote several figures from memory on a sheet for him. Cale took it. His gaze paused on her handwriting. For a moment he said nothing. Ilara felt the old instinctive warning tighten inside her. What? Nothing. But Cale's eyes moved once from her note to a document already lying on his desk, the marriage negotiations bearing Seraphine Vale's signature. The two scripts were unmistakably different. He looked back at Alara. She waited for the question. It never came. Cale simply folded her note and kept it. That should have frightened her more than it did. What frightened her was what happened over the following days. He began asking her opinion, then seeking her out when he did not need to. A meal that could have been delivered to separate rooms became a conversation over maps. A question about supplies became an hour discussing why officials failed to see the people hidden beneath their numbers. Every time Alara tried to become inconvenient, Cale seemed to discover another reason to keep her near. Finally, after another summons arrived at her chambers, she stared at it in disbelief. Her plan had been simple: make the Alpha King regret his bride. Instead, she was beginning to suspect that the more badly she performed the woman he thought he had married, the more interested he became in the woman underneath. And there was a far more dangerous question she could no longer ignore. If Cale had noticed that signature, why had he said nothing? Alara decided subtlety had failed her. If ignoring protocol only made Cale respect her, then she would give his court something harder to forgive. The opportunity came at a formal dinner 3 nights later. Nobles, commanders, and visiting political guests filled the long hall while Alara sat beside Cale wearing the composure expected of the woman everyone still believed was Seraphine Vale. She endured ceremonial conversation until one visiting lord began complaining about the resources being sent to remote northern families. They contribute almost nothing to the court, he said. Yet the crown spends grain and coin keeping them comfortable. Alara remembered the settlement. They weren't comfortable. The lord glanced toward her. A figure of speech, Your Majesty. No. It was inaccurate. Cale said nothing. So Alara continued. She described the shortages, the damaged distribution system, and the families who had been promised supplies that never arrived. When the lord suggested such people should simply contribute more, Alara calmly listed what those settlements produced and how much reached the royal stores. By the time she finished, several commanders were hiding smiles. The lord was not. Alara turned toward Cale, almost daring him to be embarrassed. He lifted his cup. My wife has answered you. That was all. It was also enough to destroy her second attempt. Later, Alara tried another approach. If I'm apparently useful with relief administration, she told Cale, send me somewhere I can actually work. Away from you, she did not add. Cale studied her. You want responsibility? I want something more useful than dinners. Granted. Relief came too quickly. Then he added, there is another district inspection in 2 days. I'm going with you. Alara nearly protested before realizing that would expose her intention. The journey gave her exactly the distance from court she had wanted and none of the distance from Cale. They spent hours reviewing storehouses, questioning officials, and speaking with families. Without a banquet hall watching them, Alara stopped trying to perform badly and simply worked. Cale did the same. She saw how carefully he listened before making decisions, how much exhaustion he concealed behind that severe expression, and how rarely anyone asked what carrying an entire kingdom cost him. He saw her kneel in mud to speak with an elderly villager when no noble audience existed to reward the gesture. Something between them changed quietly. Not affection yet, but trust had begun becoming dangerous. On the return journey, Cale asked almost casually, do you still hate horses? Alara looked at him. What? After your accident. Her pulse stumbled. He continued watching the road. The Vale records mention you were thrown when you were 13. You refused to ride for months afterward. Seraphine. Alara searched desperately for something safe to say. I recovered. Clearly. Cale glanced toward her. There was no accusation in his face, which somehow made the question worse. By the time they reached the citadel, Alara understood. The handwriting had not been forgotten. Neither had her earlier mistake about Seraphine's childhood. Cale was testing the edges of a story he no longer entirely believed. That evening, a sealed message arrived from House Vale. Alara recognized Seraphine's hand immediately. Maintain the marriage until the Moon Council. Do nothing reckless. Once the treaty is ratified, we will arrange your disappearance before he learns who you are. Alara read it twice, then carried it to the fireplace. She had obeyed because she believed survival required it. Now Seraphine was still deciding when Alara would vanish, as though her life remained a problem to be moved from one room to another. Anger sharpened inside her. She held the letter over the flame. Paper curled black at the edges. The door opened behind her. Alara turned. Cale stood there. His gaze dropped to the burning sheet in her hand. She released it, but the flame had not yet consumed everything. Cale stepped closer and looked down as the remaining fragment landed beside the hearth. Only a few words survived. Before he learns who you are. Neither of them moved. Alara's heartbeat thundered. Cale raised his eyes to hers. He could have demanded the letter. He could have summoned guards, questioned the messenger, or ordered her to explain every contradiction he had quietly collected. Instead he looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "When you decide there is something I need to know, tell me yourself." He turned and left. Alara remained beside the dying fire, staring after him. She had spent days trying to create enough distance that Cale would send her away. Instead, every escape had brought him closer. And now she knew something far more frightening than being discovered. He was giving her the chance to choose whether to trust him. Cale's words should have made confession easier. Instead, they made silence hurt. For 2 days, Alara carried the unfinished truth everywhere. Each time she saw him, she imagined saying her real name. Each time, she remembered the trust in his voice beside the hearth and discovered that she was more afraid of losing it than she had ever been of his anger. Then the winter storm came. They were returning from the relief inspection when snow swallowed the road faster than the escort could safely continue. The nearest shelter was a small railway station used by patrols crossing the northern route. There were no courtiers there. No ceremonial table. No throne. Only a fire, rough wooden furniture, and the sound of wind against shuttered windows. For the first time since the wedding, Alara sat across from Cale with nothing requiring either of them to pretend. She watched him remove his gloves and flex tired fingers toward the fire. "Can I ask you something?" "You usually do." Despite herself, she smiled. "Why does everyone think you're a monster?" Cale's expression changed. "Perhaps because I encouraged them to." Alara waited. After a long silence, he explained. There had been assassination attempts. Alliances offered by men who later betrayed him. People who smiled while calculating what access to the Alpha King could buy them. Fear had eventually become useful. A ruler people feared was harder to manipulate, and enemies who believed him merciless behaved more predictably. So you became what they expected. I allowed them to believe it. And now, Cale looked into the fire. Now I sometimes wonder whether anyone remembers there is a man underneath it. The answer struck too close. Alara could have told him then. My name is Alara. The woman you were promised is my sister. Everything began with a lie. Her lips parted. But fear won. Instead, she said, I know what it is to be valued only for what you can provide. Cale looked at her. She continued before courage disappeared completely. In my family, usefulness was safer than being wanted. If they needed something from me, at least I knew why I was allowed to stay. His face hardened, though not at her. No one should have taught you that. The simplicity of it nearly broke her. Cale moved closer to the fire but maintained the space between them. I don't know what you're hiding, he said. I know only that you believe telling me will cost you something. Alara went still. I told you before. When you decide I need to know, tell me yourself. And until then, I won't tear it from you. His gaze held hers. And I want nothing else from you that you do not freely give. For one dangerous heartbeat, Alara wanted to cross the distance between them. She did not. Neither did he. By morning, the storm had weakened enough for them to return to the citadel. Something had changed anyway. Cale began bringing relief reports directly to Alara. He gave her authority to review distribution records and recommend changes. When one advisor referred to the work as an indulgence granted to the Queen, Cale corrected him. She has the responsibility because she proved she can carry it. Not because she was his wife. Because she had earned it. The distinction stayed with Alara. Their conversation stretched later. Maps remained open between them long after decisions had been made. Sometimes Cale came looking for her without any document in his hand at all. And Ilara stopped inventing reasons to escape his company. That frightened her most. The marriage was false. The name he knew was false. But the woman who argued with him, worked beside him, laughed unexpectedly at his dry remarks, and understood the loneliness beneath his power was not false. Neither was the way he looked at her now. One evening, Cale found her alone over the relief ledgers. "The Moon Council begins in 4 days, he said. Ilara's stomach tightened. The truth clock had finally acquired a date. Before she could answer, footsteps approached outside. A royal messenger entered carrying a sealed dispatch. Cale opened it. His expression became unreadable. "What is it?" He handed her the message. House Vale's delegation would arrive for the council the following afternoon. At its head were her father and Seraphine. Ilara read her sister's name once. Then again. The fragile safety she had built inside the citadel suddenly felt as temporary as shelter from a winter storm. Cale had given her the chance to tell him the truth herself. Now the woman whose identity Ilara had been wearing was coming to take that chance away. The next afternoon, Seraphine arrived at the northern citadel wearing the face Ilara had borrowed for weeks. She looked exactly as Ilara remembered, perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, and entirely unwilling to admit fear. Their father entered behind her with the solemn expression he reserved for political occasions. He barely looked at Ilara before asking about the council preparations. Seraphine waited until they were alone. "You're still here." Ilara stared at her. "You told me to maintain the marriage. Until the treaty is ratified. You never said what would happen after." Seraphine's expression hardened. "You disappear." The words were spoken as if they were obvious. Ilara folded her hands. "No," her sister blinked. "You don't get to decide that anymore." Seraphine stepped closer. "Do you understand what happens if the truth comes out before the council? Father loses the alliance. I lose my future. The entire family could be ruined. You were willing to ruin me. I was afraid. So was I." For a moment neither spoke. Then Seraphine's eyes shifted toward the corridor. "You think because Cale looks at you differently now you're safe?" Ilara said nothing. "He chose the woman he thought I was," Seraphine whispered. "When he learns you stole my place, he will send you away." The words landed precisely where Ilara feared they would. But she refused to show it. "I will tell him myself." Seraphine's face tightened. "No. You will do what you were told." She left before Ilara could answer. That evening Cale found Ilara in the council library. He did not ask about Seraphine. He simply placed several reports before her and waited while she reviewed them. "You've been avoiding me," he said eventually. "I've been preparing for the council." "That isn't what I said." Ilara looked up. His expression was calm, but the question beneath it was unmistakable. She wanted to tell him. She almost did. Instead, she closed the report. "There's something I need to explain." Cale became completely still. Before she could continue, a council messenger entered and announced that the treaty session would begin at dawn. The interruption felt like fate offering her one final delay. After the messenger left, Cale remained beside the table. "When this council ends," he said, "I want to change something." Ilara's throat tightened. "Our marriage was arranged for political reasons. We both know that." He paused. "I no longer want it to remain only that." She could barely breathe. Cale's gaze held hers. "I want to know whether there could be something real between us. But only if you choose it." The words should have made her happy. Instead, guilt spread through her chest. He was offering her exactly what she had secretly wanted. And he was offering it to a woman he still believed was Seraphine. Ilara lowered her eyes. "I need you to know the truth before you ask me that." Cale did not move. "Then tell me." Her heart pounded. She opened her mouth. Nothing came. Because telling him now would not merely expose the substitution. It would force him to reconsider every moment they had shared. She finally whispered, "After the council." His jaw tightened, but he nodded. After the council. The next morning, the Moon Council assembled. Ilara entered beside Cale wearing the same silver ceremonial gown from their wedding, though she had removed the veil. Seraphine stood across the chamber. Her eyes met Ilara's. There was no fear in them now, only calculation. Alara suddenly understood. Her sister had waited long enough. She was not planning to let Alara tell the truth. She was planning to tell it first, and make sure everyone heard it from her. Seraphine stepped into the center of the council chamber before Alara could speak. "Before this council begins," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall, "there is something your majesty has a right to know." Every conversation stopped. Alara felt the blood drain from her face. Seraphine looked at Kale. "The woman standing beside you is not my sister." A murmur swept through the chamber. Alara closed her eyes for one heartbeat. Then she opened them. "No more hiding." "She is telling the truth," Alara said. The chamber fell silent. Seraphine turned toward her, clearly expecting resistance. Instead, Alara reached for the silver veil resting over her arm. She lifted it. Then she placed it on the council table. "My name is Alara Vale." Her father surged to his feet. "Enough." Alara looked at him. No, it was the first time she had ever said it to him without lowering her eyes. "I was forced to take my sister's place before the wedding. She refused to marry the Alpha King, and our family threatened me with the consequences if I refused." Seraphine immediately interrupted. "I was afraid, and she agreed willingly." "I agreed because I was afraid too." The words stopped her sister. Alara continued. "I should have told the truth immediately. I did not. I continued the deception because I was terrified of losing the first place where I had ever felt safe." Kale had not moved. His face was unreadable. That frightened Alara more than anger would have. Seraphine turned toward him. "Your Majesty, she deceived you. The marriage should be annulled immediately." Kale finally spoke. "I know." The chamber went still again. Alara stared at him. Kale looked directly at her. "I knew something was wrong." Her breath caught. The handwriting on the relief report did not match the signature on the marriage documents. "You gave answers about my wife's childhood that did not belong to her. And the message you burned made the situation impossible to ignore." He paused. "The original documents were compared with your handwriting yesterday." Alara's chest tightened. "So you knew." "Enough to suspect. Why didn't you say anything?" His eyes hardened, but not with hatred. "Because I wanted you to tell me yourself." The answer did not erase the betrayal. Alara saw that clearly. "I should have," she whispered. "Yes." The single word hurt. Kale looked toward the council. Under the terms of the alliance, a marriage entered under a false identity may be challenged. One advisor immediately began discussing legal consequences. Another mentioned the treaty. Their voices blurred together. Alara heard only one thing. The marriage could be voided. She had spent weeks fearing discovery. Now discovery meant freedom. And somehow it felt like losing everything. Kale turned back toward her. "I will not imprison you. I will not punish you for being forced into this. But I will not pretend the deception did not happen." Alara nodded slowly. "You shouldn't." His expression tightened. "Then the marriage is void." The word struck harder than she expected. Seraphine looked relieved. Her father looked furious. Alara simply stood there, feeling the weight of the silver veil beside her. She had wanted Kale to send her away when she first arrived. She had wanted freedom. Yet when freedom finally came, she realized the person she was losing was no longer the monster she had feared. He was the man she loved. Alara turned toward the doors. No one stopped her. She walked out of the council chamber without taking the crown, the jewels, or any of the gifts Kale had given her. For the first time since her sister forced her into the wedding gown, nobody was telling her where she had to go. And for the first time she had no idea where she wanted to go. The northern citadel felt different without the crown. Alara had expected relief. Instead, every familiar corridor seemed to hold an echo of the life she had almost been allowed to keep. She packed only what belonged to her before the wedding. The silver gown remained folded in the wardrobe. The jewels remained untouched. She took none of the gifts Kale had given her. By evening, a servant delivered a message from the council. The marriage had been formally voided. Alara read it twice. Then she folded the paper and placed it beside her bag. There was no reason to stay. For the first time she could leave without deceiving anyone. Before dawn she rode south. She did not return to her father's estate. When she arrived, she found Seraphine waiting in the courtyard. You came back. No, Elara dismounted. I came to tell you I am not coming back. Her father stepped from the doorway. You have embarrassed this family enough. Elara looked at him steadily. I spent my entire life accepting whatever role you gave me. I was the daughter who could be sacrificed, the sister who could be replaced, the person expected to disappear whenever someone more important needed the space. Her voice remained calm. That ends now. Seraphine's expression shifted. Elara, I was afraid. So was I. The words were not cruel. They were final. I won't let you decide my future because you are frightened again. She turned away before either of them could answer. The road north was quiet. With every mile, Elara understood something she had never understood before. She had spent weeks trying to escape the marriage. Then she had spent weeks trying to preserve it. Now she had neither obligation nor protection. If she returned to Kale, it could not be because she was wearing Seraphine's gown, carrying a treaty, or obeying her family. Could only be because she wanted him. That realization terrified her. It also made the answer simple. By sunset, the northern citadel appeared beyond the hills. Elara stopped her horse at the gates. She could still turn around. No one would blame her. No one would command her. She rode inside. Kale was in the council chamber when the doors opened. He looked up. For one suspended moment, neither spoke. Then his gaze moved to the empty space where her veil should have been. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. I know. You're free. I know. His expression tightened. Then why did you come back? Elara stepped closer. Because I finally understand the difference between being forced to stay and choosing to return. Kale said nothing. She took another step. I am not Seraphine. I never was. I cannot undo what I did. But if you are willing to know me as Elara, with nothing binding you to me, then I want the chance to begin again. Kale's eyes remained fixed on hers. He did not reach for her. He did not claim her. Instead he walked toward the ceremonial hall where their marriage had begun. Elara followed. At the same doorway where she had once entered hidden beneath another woman's veil, Kale stopped. He turned toward her. If you walk through that door now, he said, it will not be as my political wife. Elara waited. It will be because you choose me. For the first time there was no lie between them. No sister's name. No treaty. No fear disguised as duty. Only the choice she had been denied from the beginning. Elara looked at the open doorway. Then she stepped toward it. Elara stepped through the doorway. Kale followed only after she had crossed it herself. The ceremonial hall was almost empty now, stripped of the crowded court and the pressure that had filled it on their wedding night. Yet Elara remembered everything. The silver veil. The vows spoken under another woman's name. The fear that had made every step feel like surrender. Now there was no veil. No family standing behind her. No treaty waiting to decide what she was worth. Kale stopped several paces away. I meant what I said, he told her. If you stay, it cannot be because you owe me anything. I know. The marriage was voided. I know. And I will not simply restore it. Elara's heart tightened. She had expected those words. She had feared them. But she had also come prepared to accept them. I don't want the old marriage back, she said. I want a new choice. Something in Kale's expression softened. Not enough to erase what had happened. Enough to show that he was listening. Elara drew a slow breath. I was forced into your wedding. I lied about my name. I continued the lie when I should have told you the truth. I cannot ask you to pretend that none of that happened. I won't. She nodded. But everything that happened after I became your wife was real to me. Kale looked down for a moment. When I discovered the truth, he said, I wondered whether every moment between us had been another part of the deception. Elara's eyes burned. And his gaze returned to hers. I remembered the woman who argued with officials because families were hungry. The woman who refused praise for doing what she believed was right. The woman who looked at me and asked why everyone feared me. A faint, almost helpless smile touched his mouth. You were never very good at pretending to be someone else. Elara laughed softly through the tears gathering in her eyes. I was trying very hard. I know. He stepped closer. But I also remembered that you stayed when you could have walked away. You worked beside me when no one was watching. You trusted me before you knew whether I deserved it. His voice lowered. And when you finally became free, you still came back. Alara swallowed. I came back because I couldn't imagine going anywhere else. For the first time since the council, Kale reached for her hand. He stopped before touching her. Alara closed the remaining distance herself. Her fingers slipped into his. The simple contact carried none of the force of their first vows. This time she had chosen it. Kale looked toward the doorway behind her. Do you remember entering here? Yes. You were wearing her veil. I was. And you were afraid. I was. He looked back at her. Are you afraid now? Alara considered the question. Yes. Kale's expression tightened. She smiled. But I'm choosing this anyway. His hand closed gently around hers. Then so am I. The court would have to renegotiate what the Veil Alliance meant. The false marriage would remain void. Seraphine could no longer decide Alara's future. And Alara would no longer live as the expendable daughter waiting for someone else's permission to belong. None of that needed to be erased. It was part of the cost. What mattered was that neither of them was pretending the past had not happened. Kale leaned closer, his forehead resting briefly against hers. I thought I wanted a queen who could survive beside me. Alara smiled. And now I know I cannot imagine this place without you. The words were quiet, but they answered the promise hidden in the title better than any grand declaration could. Alara looked once more at the doorway. At the beginning, she had crossed it because her sister forced her forward. Now she stood there unveiled, unclaimed by duty, with every path open to her. And she had chosen the one that led back to him. This time nobody pushed her. This time nobody chose for her. Alara took Kale's hand and walked through the doorway beside him.